I'm Mayor Rick Goldring, and welcome to Burlington Matters. Burlington Matters is a program featuring topical discussion about a number of different issues and events that are occurring within the city of Burlington. Today we're talking about remembrance as we lead up to Remembrance Day. And obviously Remembrance Day shouldn't be the only day of the year that we remember the tremendous sacrifice by so many people, our brave veterans and our current veterans serving overseas on peacekeeping missions as well. In any event, we've got some great guests today. First of all, to my immediate left is Ed Heatley. And Ed served in the Korean War between 1951 and 1952. Welcome, Ed. We have Hoo-Jong Jones, and Hoo-Jong has been very involved in many different things with regard to remembering the tremendous contribution of Canadian soldiers in the Korean War. And Hoo-Jong, we welcome you, and you're a member of the National Unification Advisory Council, and someone who has done so much in our community for the veterans, as well as retired Major Don Kennedy. So we welcome all three of you to the show. So Ed, you're the star of the show here. You're the one who served in Korea between 1951 and 1952. Tell us just briefly about how you decided to serve in the Korean War. I guess you decided to serve in the military first,
right? And
then that led up to you being posted in Korea,
right? Well, my dad was a soldier. He was in the 2nd 10th Dragoons from Hamilton. He was in England in the early years and spent a few years over there. But he was, my grandparents were too old; they couldn't look after my brother and I too well, so they brought him back home again, and he worked at Stelco for years. And I joined up, and
so you joined in what year did you join the
1950.
1950.
Yeah, 1950.
And then it was about what, a little bit more than a year later?
Yes.
When you went to Korea?
Yes. Like I say, my brother joined up, but I was in Camp Borden at the time,
right? And
they shipped my brother out to Calgary in the Princess Pat. So I thought, well, I better go and be with him to look after him, because he was 3 years younger than I was. So when we got out to Calgary, everything was fine, and then the Korean War started, and my brother was put on the draft to go to Korea. So I had a good job in Camp Borden. I was a barman in the officers' mess.
I would say that's a good job. Yes,
a good job. Yeah. And but anyway, I thought, well, my kid brother's going out to Calgary, and I said I got to go and look after him or help to. So I put in for a transfer. I got a transfer, and a couple of months later, I got put on the draft to go to Calgary. We got out there, and we were in the Princess Pats, assigned to them. So then he got put on the draft to Korea. So I put in for a transfer again to go to Korea with him to kind of look after him. I thought I was going anyway, but we got shipped out to Vancouver to go to Korea, and then when we were loading on the ship for the trip over, then they were checking everybody's age and that sort of thing. So my brother, he went up ahead of me, and they said he was too young to go, so they took him off the draft, and I was gone.
You kept going.
I had to.
Yeah. We'll come back to you in a second. I want to go to Hoo-Jong and talk about the fact that the Korean War started in 1950. It certainly doesn't have the same awareness in the Canadian public the way World War I and World War II do. Can you give us just a little bit of background on how the Korean War started, and why do you think that it has been not as prevalent in our memory banks or in our awareness as World War I and World War II.
I mean, Korea has a really long history, 5,000 years history.
Yes.
But after the 1910 Japanese occupation, the Korea became a slave country. And when Korean War began, before that, 1945, we had a Hiroshima and Nagasaki bomb,
right.
and then Korea liberated as well. And then after 5 years, as you mentioned, that we had a Korean War, 1950, because Korea was divided by South and North. Right. North was occupied by Soviet Union,
yes.
and the Republic of China, and also the South was occupied and controlled and helped by the United States and United Nations. Therefore, in 1950, June 25th, the North Korea, help of Soviet Union, they invade Korea. And the reason we don't have so much awareness is that it was overshadowed by First War and Second War, and Korean War, we had a casualty of only 516 compared to 60,000 First War and 40,000 Second War. However, the Korean War veterans fought viciously, and then the most amazing military compliment is in Korea of Gapyeong battle.
Wow. Going back to Ed. So you served for a year in Korea,
right.
And what was your role while you were there for the 12 months that you were in Korea?
Well,
you weren't a barman at the mess, I assume.
No, that was in Camp Orden.
Okay.
And, no, I was in the front lines and in the trenches, and it was.
So you were in the middle of battle.
Well, I didn't get in any of the big battles or anything like
right.
that.
But you were in close proximity.
Yes,
yes,
we were getting bombed down and raped and by aircraft and stuff like that, and we had that kind of stuff. I was lucky. In one way, I didn't get in any of the armed battles, and but it was scary at times.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And you were close to the end of your term in serving in Korea.
Yes.
And what happened a week before?
A week before I was to get deployed back to Canada, I got shot, and both arms and across my chest. So I was very fortunate there. A quarter of an inch to the right, and then I wouldn't have been here. And then I spent a year in Sunnybrook Hospital, which is a great hospital.
You know, my aunt, just as an aside, my aunt served as a nurse in the Second World War in Italy. Mm-hmm. And when she came back, she was a nurse at
Sunnybrook. Yeah.
So, I mean, she was there when you were there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. You know, I spent a year there, and I had 6 operations. And here I am. I'm back again.
So what did you do after the war?
Well, I can't remember everything I did, but
career-wise, what did you end up doing when you were finished your posting in Korea and you'd recovered from your?
Well, eventually I got better out of the hospital, and I was able to get out and around. So I got a job, and I worked for Crockett Motors in Hamilton. It's used to be one of the best garages around. So I worked there for a couple of years, and just kind of faded away and got into regular life in town type of thing. Met my girlfriend in the hospital because she happened to be the brother or the sister of one of our Army mates in the same outfit as I was in. And so I was with her for 60 years.
Now, when was the last time you went back to South Korea?
Oh, I can't remember the year. It was about 6 years ago, I think now,
Okay.
6 or 7 years ago. Went back for a revisit.
And how was that?
Excellent. The place had changed so much you wouldn't believe the difference in it. And big buildings, all businesses, going, lights, and everything. It was as big as Toronto. Easy. Yeah.
No, I know my daughter taught English in South Korea for 2 years, and not far from Seoul. And I didn't get a chance to go visit her, but I'm quite aware of the lifestyle in Korea. I mean, it's very different than obviously it was. It's probably one of the most rapidly progressed economies since the Second World War.
A world of difference.
And really, since the end of the Korean War, it's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
What is the legacy left?
The legacy left
by the Korean War veterans?
First of all, legacy left is our freedom. Without them fighting to Korea, who they never ever heard of it, never seen it, I wouldn't be alive here. I wouldn't be here with you and discussing this. That's the legacy, is the freedom and life saved of over 50 million people in South Korea, somewhat impacted by all Canadians and UN veterans who helped us. That's the legacy of Korean War, is freedom and peace, and also to come here to enjoy our life. And also legacy of Korea is, Korea was most poorest country right after the Ethiopia, and they become 12th largest economic power of the world. The legacy of everything is freedom, economic, and now we are celebrating hosting the Pyeongchang Olympic. The Korea reaped from the ruin of the war. The legacy of Korea is from the Korean War veterans.
And Don, you've been involved in helping us remember the service of the Korean War vets. Can you tell us about your involvement? I know that the War Monument down in Spencer Smith Park you had something to do with.
I was on the committee, there was 5 of us, to raise funds to design, and at this point I have to say that most of the work, the raising the funds, the writing of the grants, the design, Hu Jung accomplished that. And through that effort we were able to raise the monument for the 8 Canadian destroyers and the 9 Canadian sailors who had died during the Korean War and who had no known grave. Hu Jung always thought that was an oversight, and that we should honor those 9 sailors with a monument for their bravery, and also honor the 8 destroyers, one of which is the Haida, which is parked at Pier 9 right now.
Right.
So we managed to get it together, raise the funds, and luckily the city of Burlington granted us a piece of property that we could put the monument on beside the Second World War Naval Monument, which was excellent. The monument was erected and commemorated. And it was just a moving ceremony.
Yeah, I remember it very well. It was moving. It was quite significant.
It was.
If you just tuned in, we're watching. You are watching. Not we're watching. You are watching Burlington Matters. I'm Mayor Rick Goldring. We're talking about Remembrance Day, and we're talking about the Korean War. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on Burlington Matters. Welcome back to Burlington Matters. I'm Mayor Rick Goldring, and we're featuring a discussion about the Korean War and the tremendous impact that Canadian veterans have in serving the Korean people. Hu Jung, you've been involved. You're so passionate. I mean, it's wonderful to have you on the program and sharing your passion about the tremendous contribution of veterans like Ed Heatley. But you've done so much. You've done many different things. We can go on for an hour talking about the tremendous contribution you made to our veterans. But as far as remembering the contribution, you've put together a whole number of photographs we're going to take a look at a few of them, but tell us about this compilation of photographs you have from the Korean War.
Yes. For many students, a lot of people have no knowledge of Korean War. And what would be the best to give? The picture speaks 1,000 words. And I thought, let's go to the veterans and their house, and we'll get it, the photographs, and scan it one by one, and then compile the book and a story together. So that book like this called Canadian Our Heroes. And so they can be in the school and library and talk about snapshot of Korea and young children, even high school students, and they can learn by photographs and the story of Korean War veteran. So I have collected over 20,000 photographs, and this book was published in 2005, and then this way that all the school students will have that.
For us
yes.
Take a look at?
This is the first person who died,
right.
R.N. Lewis, and he's from Hamilton, 2nd Battalion, Princess Patricia Light Infantry. He died in February 12, and that's first we started to compile photographs. And these are the Ken Garrison. He's a Korean War veteran who just died. We're celebrating his 27th anniversary birthday in the Korea. And this is the Korea patrolling. And this is not actual, Canadian didn't have the Canadian flag.
Right.
However, at the time, we want to present to Canada as a Canadian flag.
Yeah.
We changed it in 1965 after the Korean War. So I want people to see Canada.
So let's take a look at some of the photos that you've compiled of the 20,000.
Yes.
It's going to go on the monitor. And let's just take a look. Can you just give us a description of
yes,
that,
these
John?
veterans, you can see the camera, and there's so much difference between our digital camera
yes.
to this camera. You can see Canadian veteran somewhat has the mustache, and that's something that I would like to press that. These are the Canadian engineer. They go first in and last out, same as the signal veterans. And these are veterans who are helping to set the road and build a bridge and build the houses. And they see these two young children. These are orphans from the Korean War. They are taking care of children on top of building bridge and fighting. And they are also taking picture of the combat photographs. And so these are the photographs from Hamiltonian who served. And then they brought this valuable photograph. And that photograph is one of my favorite because the camera speaks everything.
Yes, it talks about the vintage for sure. And the next photo we'll take a look at.
This is really heartbreaking, is that we are looking at the Battle of Gapyeong, and then when the people are fighting, you can see the trench. The Korean War was like almost forced war. I just recently came back from France, and the France has the Vimy and Passchendaele, same as that same tactic. They are so high in mountain, you have to dig a trench. So they are fighting trench war in 1950, same way as First War. And these are veterans, just before they die, they were in that photographs.
This is just before they died?
Yes.
Wow.
And this is from photographs from Joe Hogan, who was one of our unit member died. And this you can see their car and then one of the guns that show. And they had the majority of guns and tanks are used beforehand was the Second War veterans who used that. And the reason they are so tactical, because we had a great commander, Brigadier General. We had a 25th Infantry General. His name is Rock Lockingham, and he used to be Second War veterans and commanding officer, Royal Hamilton Light Hamilton Infantry. He had one rule: you gotta be the highest place in the mountain to put their foot and fighting the enemy, because he learned that from Second War lesson. They got killed so many times, so he insists the highest mountain high, which is Hill 677, very high in altitude. They were fighting Chinese army in that high altitude to overlook.
The next one.
That's the south limit demilitarization zone. as I mentioned, South Korea and North Korea cut it in half at the 38 parallel, and that's in Korean, 비무장지대, and that is the South and North Korea still in this stage. The reason you can see the little barbed wire. My little brother, I mean my cousin brother, at age 19, he got beheaded in the DMZ after the Korean War, about 1972. So I feel the pain, what they went through, because after the war, they still had this incident. Still over 300 incidents of North Korea killing South Koreans, including the Yeonpyeong-haejeon, which is the Korean destroyer as well. This
Who's
is
this
Ed
guy?
Lilly. And you can explain what you're holding.
That's just a semi-automatic.
Do you remember the vintage?
Yeah.
Do you remember what was going on that day?
No,
No, not that. That was too long ago.
Yeah.
I actually trained on that. That's a Bren gun, light machine
yeah.
gun.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the last photo that we have to share.
This is one of my favorite that Ed took. These are the Canadian veteran holding the Korean flag.
That's my corporal of our
Yes.
commander and one of the other buddies.
It says it all. The Korean flag says it all.
Yeah.
So our troops were very invested in obviously the
Yes.
mission that they were on.
That's right.
They took it very seriously, and they were proud of their contribution.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And the fact that South Korea is still free today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don, we haven't talked much to you during this this program, but I understand that your father served in World War II.
Yes.
And did that lead to you becoming interested in serving in the military yourself?
Definitely. He actually joined in 1927, 12 years before the Second World War, in the Royal Canadian Corps of Signals at the Armories on James Street. So by 1939, he was already a 12-year experienced sergeant. Of course, he was one of the first to volunteer to go overseas. So when he left, he went for the 1st Canadian Division, and he was gone for 6 years.
The whole 6 years?
The whole 6 years. He didn't come back. My older brother and older sister at the time, they were just babes in arms. They grew up without him. So when he came home, he was a stranger to them. Now, I was born in 1949, after the war,
okay.
Baby boomer, and
Right.
my younger brother was born in 1951. And Dad, I was always very, very proud of him to be able to say that he had gone off to war. And yes, I joined the Royal Canadian Corps of Cadets in 1964 and 1965. Then I joined the Argyll and Southern Highlanders of Canada, 1966. At that time, there were a lot of Second World War and Korean War veterans who were senior non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers, and I learned an awful lot from their experience. It was only 20 years after the Second World War and only 15 years after the Korean War. So they were still serving at the time I joined. The battle lessons that they taught us was invaluable. They started retiring probably into the 70s or so, and the last ones were gone by the very early 80s.
Ed, what memory or what statement would you like to make to younger people today that really have not come close to experiencing war to any degree?
I'm afraid of what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
You're concerned about the state of the world today.
Yeah.
And I think we look at what's going on still
Yes.
in Korea.
North Korea,
Yeah.
yes.
Right, and obviously North Korea and the concern there. Because, I mean, you went through it. You went through it a long time ago, and it's very different today than it is back then. But you have real concern about the future.
Yeah, I got to catch my breath here.
maybe while you're catching your breath, I'm going to go Hoo-jong.
Yeah,
Talk about the
okay.
fact that when my daughter was in South Korea, it was interesting that, you know, I pay attention to what's going on in the world, but when your daughter's in a different country, you pay even more attention. And there was always something flaring up, like some rhetoric flaring up. And when I talked to my daughter, I think on Facebook one day, or on FaceTime or whatever, Skype, I said, what do people over in South Korea, how do they handle the stress of living right next door to North Korea? How do they handle the rhetoric and that goes on? And my daughter said they choose not to talk about it.
Because
what can you do?
Yeah, the Korean War is not finished. We signed the armistice in July 27, 1953. So technically, Korean War is not ended. And so people have lived through the threat of North Korea's invasion. So somewhat the people of South Koreans are a little more desensitized than rest of us. However, the threat is very valid, and then we have to make as Ed have fought, we have to be making a peace talk, and then to come up with a better solution for denuclearization of the North Koreas.
I mean, we want to avoid war.
Absolutely.
That would definitely,
At almost all costs.
All costs.
But you have to be prepared for it just the same.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, being prepared actually helps in your negotiations when you're prepared. And you can back away. Because you have the strength. Obviously, that's on your side. But Ed, I caught you off guard there when I asked for a comment. But what would you like to share, though, with people about your experience in serving the Canadian military in the Korean War, as far as wrapping up?
I would want to be sure that some of the people now would join up if they had to. I'm afraid that that's not going to be possible because they think they know everything and they want to do everything, but they don't want to pay for it. So it's going to take a lot of lives and people to stand up for Canada.
Well, Ed, we thank you for your service to Canada, and we thank so many people of your vintage that have served this country with distinction, and we never ever want to forget. We will always remember the tremendous contribution you've made into making Canada the country it is. We thank you for that. And Hoo-jong, we thank you for your tremendous dedication to memorializing the tremendous contributions of Ed and other Korean War veterans, because it does not have the same attention that the First and Second World War had, but it has it more now because of your contribution. So we thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Don, we thank you for your commitment to serving Canada and serving the military. We're very fortunate to have the depth and talent of armed forces in Canada that have served and that continue to serve. So we thank you all for being with me today and helping put some light on what happened in Korea back in 1950-53. Thank you very much for tuning in to Burlington Matters. I am Mayor Rick Goldring. We'll see you next time on Burlington Matters on your TV, truly local television. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Canada